Tomorrow, a match that isn't even officially part of the US Open yet is drawing more attention than most first-round matches of the tournament itself. On one side of the net, a 21-year-old from Quezon City who was ranked outside the world's top 140 players 18 months ago. On the other side, a husband and a wife stepping onto a Grand Slam court together for the very first time in their lives. Because this is not just another mixed doubles opener. This is Gaël Monfils' last Grand Slam, and Eala is standing directly in the middle of it. As of the most recent update from tournament organizers, the exact court and start time for Tuesday's match had not even been locked in yet. That's how new this all is. But here is what we do know. Eala and her partner, world number 4 Felix Auger-Aliassime, will open their US Open mixed doubles campaign against Elina Svitolina and Gaël Monfils at the USTA Billie Jean King National Tennis Center in New York. It is the kind of draw that makes people stop scrolling, because behind that single match is something much bigger than a double scoreline. There is a career ending, there is a career rising. And there is a question that tennis fans have quietly been asking all year. Is Eala simply riding a hot stretch of form, or are we watching the early chapters of something the sports will be talking about for a long time? Hold on to that question, because to understand what Tuesday actually means, you have to go back, not to last week, not to last month, but to a preschooler on the shell courts of a country club in Pasig City, swinging a racket that was almost as big as she was. Eala did not come from a tennis family in the way people usually mean that phrase. Her father, Mike, was a swimmer who won bronze at the Southeast Asian Games. Her mother, Riza, competed at that same level in the pool. Tennis entered the picture through her grandfather, a man she called Lolo Bob, who became her very first coach. From the age of 3.5 until she was 13, it was him and her, training almost every day in a country where world-class tennis coaching simply was not close at hand. That last part matters more than it sounds like it should. The Philippines has never been a tennis powerhouse. There was no established pipeline, no long list of Filipino names on the WTA leaderboard to point to and say, that could be me. There wasn't really a next Eala waiting in line because there had never been a first one. Eala was, in a very real sense, building the path as she walked it, without much of a map to follow. The turning point came when she was still a young teenager at a junior tournament in France called Les Petits As, sometimes described as the unofficial Under-14 World Championship. She won it, and winning it did something few junior titles ever do. It put her on the radar of the Rafael Nadal Academy in Mallorca, Spain. At 13 years old, Eala left the Philippines. Her family relocated with her. Her parents restructured their entire professional lives around a decision most people never have to make, sending a child across the world, away from everything familiar, on the belief that this was the only way to find out how good she could actually become. She would later describe the academy as her home for 7 years, but she has also been careful to give credit where it started. The foundation, she has said, was laid by her family long before Spain ever entered the conversation. Spain simply built on top of it. By 2022, that foundation had produced something historic. At the US Open, on the same grounds where Tuesday's match will be played, 17-year-old Eala won the girls' singles title. She became the first player from the Philippines to win a junior Grand Slam singles crown, and she did it without dropping a single set the entire tournament. At the time, it looked like the ceiling of a very promising junior career. It was actually the floor. For the next few years, Eala worked her way through the unglamorous middle tier of professional tennis, the ITF and WTA 125 circuits, the tournaments that rarely make headlines outside the sport's most dedicated corners. She turned pro in March 2020. Progress was real, but it was slow, the kind of slow that tests whether a young athlete actually believes in the long road or just the highlight reel. Then came March of 2025. Eala arrived at the Miami Open, a WTA 1000 event, one of the biggest tournaments outside the four majors, ranked 140th in the world. She entered on a wild card. Nobody outside the Philippines, and honestly not many people inside it, expected her name to still be in the draw by the second week. She beat Katie Volanitz in the first round. Nothing unusual there. Then she beat Jelena Ostapenko, a Grand Slam champion. Then Madison Keys, another Grand Slam champion, ranked in the world's top 5. And then, in the quarterfinals, she beat Iga Świątek, world number 2, 5-time Grand Slam winner, one of the most dominant players of her generation. 6-2, 7-5. Since WTA rankings began in 1975, no woman from the Philippines had ever beaten a top 30 opponent. Eala had just done it 3 times in a row against 3 different Grand Slam champions in the same tournament. "I'm just in disbelief right now," she said afterward. "It's so surreal." She became the first Filipina to reach a WTA 1000 semifinal. She lost that semifinal to Jessica Pegula in a 3-set battle that ran past midnight, but by then the result almost didn't matter. Something had already shifted. Within weeks, Eala had climbed into the WTA's top 100 for the first time in Philippine tennis history. But that was only the beginning of the climb, not the end of it. A few months later, she reached her first WTA Tour final at Eastbourne, falling just short after squandering championship points. Then, at the US Open in 2025, on the same courts where her junior title had once felt like the peak of her story, she beat former top 15 player Clara Tauson in a marathon 3-setter to become the first Filipino player in the Open era to win a Grand Slam main draw singles match. If you're starting to notice a pattern in how often the word first appears in this story, that is not an accident. It is the actual shape of what Alex Eala has been doing to Philippine tennis. There was no template. She has had to write almost every page of it herself. This year, 2026, the pattern kept repeating, but at a higher altitude. In Wimbledon, she stunned defending champion Iga Świątek again, becoming the first Filipino player ever to reach the second week of a Grand Slam tournament. Speaking afterward, she grew emotional remembering the hours she once spent training with her grandfather. Then, almost as if catching herself, she added something that says a lot about how she sees her own success. "Just because I'm emotional," she said, "doesn't mean I'm satisfied." That single sentence might be the most honest thing anyone has said about this entire run. By this August, at the DC Open, she had done it again, this time going all the way. She beat Zhang Qinwen. She beat Elina Svitolina, the very woman she will face again on Tuesday. She beat Naomi Osaka. She beat defending champion Leylah Fernandez. And then, in the final, she faced Jessica Pegula, the same player who had ended her Miami dream 16 months earlier in that brutal semifinal. This time, Eala came back from a set down to win it, 4-6, 4-4, 6-love. It was her first WTA Tour singles title, the first ever for a player from the Philippines. It pushed her into the world's top 20 for the first very time. Somewhere in the middle of all this, a smaller number tells its own story. In 2024, Eala hit 4 aces across the entire season. In 2025, that number rose to 23. This year, she has already blown past 56 and counting. That is not just improvement, that is a young player who has stopped playing not to lose and started playing to win. If Alex Eala's rise is starting to pull you in the way it's pulling in tennis fans around the world right now, this is a good moment to hit subscribe, because Tuesday is only the next chapter, not the last one. None of this has happened in a vacuum either. Back home, people have stayed up through the middle of the night to watch her matches live, and she has thanked them by name, more or less, every time. She was chosen as a flag bearer for the Philippines at the opening ceremony of the 2025 Southeast Asian Games, standing beside her father in a moment both of them later called impossible to put into words. In a country with no real tennis infrastructure to speak of, Alex Eala has become the infrastructure. Every young Filipino kid picking up a racket now has an answer to the question that never used to have one. Someone from here has actually done this. Which brings us back to Tuesday, and to the two very different stories about to collide on the same court. Because Alex Eala's mixed doubles partnership with Felix Auger-Aliassime is brand new. It wasn't built over years on tour. By his own account, it came together because they share the same management agency, and their teams simply talked and made it happen. Auger-Aliassime has openly admitted this will be his first real taste of what he called the Eala effect, the wave of attention and support that now follows her onto every court she plays. They do share one real connection, though. Both trained at the Rafael Nadal Academy in Mallorca, the same place that shaped Eala from the age of 13. Across the net will be the opposite of a new partnership. Elina Svitolina and Gaël Monfils have been together since 2018. They married in 2021. They have a young daughter, and Tuesday will be the first time in all those years that they have shared a Grand Slam court as partners, in what has already been described, quietly, as part of Monfils' farewell. Monfils, once ranked as high as world number 6, announced last October that 2026 would be his final season. "I am tremendously at peace with my decision," he said at the time. Since then, nearly every tournament has carried a small undertone of goodbye. From Indian Wells to Roland Garros to Montreal, where he was eliminated earlier this month in what may have been his final singles match on North American soil. He turns 40 on September 1st, right in the middle of this US Open, and this will be his 18th appearance at the tournament. When Novak Djokovic heard the retirement news, he wrote simply, "What a treat it was to watch you every match." That is the kind of tribute reserved for players who mean something to the sport itself, not just to a scoreboard. New York has always meant something a little different to Monfils, too. It was here, back in 2016, that he reached one of only 2 Grand Slam semifinals of his entire career before Djokovic ended his run. This city has seen him at his best. Whatever happens across the net on Tuesday, that history will be sitting somewhere in the atmosphere of the match, whether the crowd says it out loud or not. So here's the problem sitting right in the middle of Tuesday's match. On paper, Eala and Auger-Aliassime look like the more explosive pairing, her lefty return angles and aggressive middle-of-the-court game paired with one of the biggest serves in men's tennis. But they have never played a competitive point together. Positioning, communication, the small instincts that only come from repetition, none of that exists between them yet. Svitolina and Monfils bring the opposite problem for their opponents to solve. Less raw firepower on paper, but real chemistry, real trust, in a crowd that will very likely be leaning toward the farewell story unfolding in front of them. There is one small question mark on their side, too. Svitolina has been managing a recent ankle issue, one worth watching once the match actually begins. There is one detail working in Eala's favor, though, and it isn't nothing. Just weeks ago, in the quarterfinals in Washington, she beat Svitolina outright, 6-3, 6-4. She has already shown she is not intimidated by the woman standing across the net from her on Tuesday. And there's a wrinkle in the format itself. This year's mixed doubles event, redesigned to open the tournament before the main draw even begins, uses shortened sets played to 4 games, no ad scoring, and a 10-point tiebreak instead of a full third set. There's almost no time to find your rhythm as a new partnership. Every single game matters immediately. Win, and it does not get easier. The winner of this match moves on the very same day to face either top seeds Ariana Sabalenka and Novak Djokovic, or the American pairing of Leylah Fernandez and Tiafoe in the quarterfinals. Lose, in Alex Eala's part in one of the sport's most quietly emotional storylines of the year, ends before it really begins. So go back to that question from the very start. Is Alex Eala just enjoying a hot stretch of form, or is something bigger actually happening here? Look at what the last 18 months actually contain. A wild card run through 3 Grand Slam champions in Miami, a junior title reclaimed as historic ground, a first Grand Slam main draw win for an entire country, a maiden WTA title earned in a comeback against the very player who once beat her when nobody outside tennis knew her name, and now a place at the center of the sport's attention on the same day a legend plays out one of the final chapters of his career. That, on its own, is already a story worth telling. Whatever the scoreboard says by the end of the day, it will not be the end of hers. If you enjoyed this one, subscribe for more tennis stories you're not going to find anywhere else, and let us know in the comments, how far do you think Alex Eala can actually go this US Open?